I'm Momoyo Kaijima.
Yoshiharu Tsukamoto.
Welcome to the lecture. And firstly, I would like to introduce the exhibition, what we create and what we organize, the space design. Made in Tokyo, 1964 and 2020. The Made in Tokyo it was published in 2001, the same name of our publishing, the yellow books. And the books, including the around 80 example, very hybrid building in Japan and Tokyo. And we try to illustrate a new building type we call in the book about the Tokyo lifestyle. So, for example, the example is the driving school and top of the supermarket building. And then they are very different adjacency, but it becomes one component as a building. So that we named the super car school in this building, and then so we enjoyed how this hybridized the condition. It's illustrated in Tokyo high density situation. And in this book also we illustrate one typology. It's called the park on park, and
park on the parking garage.
Yes, parking garage. Now, it's also related to the Olympics, 1964, because the building because of the building built. So it's a lack of the parking lot for the Olympic guests, and they reclaimed the river and make some side is also originally it was occupied by just ground floor park, but for this lack of the park plots, so they make a park under the park, so they make the parking lot. And we found many of the Made in Tokyo books are related to this kind of 1964 Olympic Games, the big transformation period buildings coming in the books. And then that's why we put, we conscious somehow, so the Made in Tokyo will be very related to the 1964 issue. And fortunately, so we got some interesting commission, the Nike Japan, because the company wanted to make a new public space by the private support to create a new public space. So that's why that they want to ask us, because of the project manager knows about our Made in Tokyo books. So that's why he asked us to design to this public park. Will be more like interesting hybridized with skateboarding and also some other rock climbing or futsal court or some public. Oh, sorry. No, okay. Mm-hmm. And then this is a video. Auto. Yes. Oh, ちょっとね。It's happened 2011. After it realizing after the earthquake, and we had some sort of the discussion to continue to complete the project, but finally we finished the project.
The park was wasn't a healthy condition. Too much grown-up vegetation, and it became very dark, and then occupied by many homeless people. And then we asked homeless people to move from the top of the garage towards lower part of the garage, and then city of world office of Shibuya made illegal structure for them to stay there, and then so finally we could make it. It's a kind of a transform. Yeah, we changed the membership of the. Yeah, we introduced a sports membership into this park to change the atmosphere. Yeah. Okay, and then.
But unfortunately, this park on park and renovated by Atelier Bow-Wow was demolished because the city Shibuya wanted to make sell the rights to develop for the much big different volumes. So
it's also influence of 2020 Olympic Games. Huh? Yeah. It's the city of Shibuya found this is a very good opportunity to develop this area.
So that's why. So this is very interesting, or some sad but interesting experience for us to how the Olympic Games affect our society as a building. And it becomes also our intention of this exhibition issue. And we started to decide, okay, maybe such a different condition and also assumption behind the building facilities, how make a difference from 1964 and 2020. So in this show, we select the specific facility we call stadium and station and the retail and office and capsule and homes. And then we try to select a good, some important example for these facilities, and then try to compare each of them, and then finding some difference to understand the condition. And the blue coming is the 2020, so like a symbol color, and the red coming the 1964, the poster or symbol color. And the space, we try to design the 3 spaces on the upper floor. It's somehow related to the Olympics because of we select the 6 zones, and then we choose a 5 ring color on the flag, and also make a central oval. It reminds us a stadium form. And inside the stadium oval, it's 2020, and outside it's 1964. So that's why they can compare in the zoning through the window. And the middle small room is showing our video, like 30 minutes. And it was painted gold, silver, bronze. And in this lecture, shortly, I wanted to explain how that these 6 facilities, and also in these 6 facilities, how Bow-Wow work as an architect. And firstly, the stadium, Yoyogi Olympic Stadium, Kenzo Tange, 1964, and then new one is the Kengokuma, new national stadium. And what Bow-Wow did, this is one art pieces, the Yokohama Triennale. It's in that same time in the World Cup, we had in the period, and then World Cup soccer, and then one artist, Koshige, 116, he proposed to make a large soccer game board, and we made some stadium around. And the second one, the Shinjuku Station, and we tried to show how the Shinjuku Station were related to the after the recovery of the World War II disaster. So, and then destruction. And then this square is also related to the receives a new commuter to organize traffic in front of the station, but also it was a planned vacant space after the destruction, and then so they try to organize a new facilities as a square. And then Bow-Wow also recently, so we designed several square, but not in center of Tokyo. It's, for example, this is located in the Saitama Prefecture. It's called Kitamoto. And originally, so Kitamoto Square was designed in the 1970s, but after, so it was governed mostly the car traffic, but then now 2020, or it was done 2015. But that moment already, so we started to think about how we can bring back to the square to be more pedestrian activities. And also we designed recently the Onomichi Station. And this is also the interesting, like a new station. So because the original station, it has over 100 years ago it was built, but station should be renovated, or maybe it's a restoration as a more like a large guest from the overseas or international guests. To become the emphasizing for the cyclist tourism to Onomichi City. So that's why we designed a very big gate and to meet in the point for the tourist and the city people, and to have also some accommodation on top for the cyclist. And in the show, so we also tried to explain to the retail. And then retail is focusing on the Ginza area. So because Ginza has a strong merchant culture, and they collaborated as a union to make a more interesting activities as a retail. And but the retail is nowadays also changing. So that we Bow-Wow also working recently with Muji, because Muji wanted to have received some consumer or like a guest. Not only for the buying some things, it's more like sometimes they need to have some staying place, like high school students to study in the store, or like children to play like a ground in the shop, something like. So that's why the retail becomes more like somehow in between the public space, and then society expect this kind of a private company to create this kind of public and private some open spaces. And office, we showed this Kasumigaseki building and also Kamiyama project in this show. But we also received some new requirement by the welfare organization that they wanted to ask us in the really rural area to create some office for the disabled people who coming from the enterprise in the urban like a Tokyo. Because in the enterprise, sometimes they could not give in them to the good working position in the company inside. So that's why this organization started to think about creating another possibility in the rural area to cooperate with the enterprise. And but this is some places so that they could work as agriculture farmers, and also that they could work also the timber industry, firewood industry. Yes, and then next one is a capsule. Here in the show, so we try to use two different type of capsule, but capsule is very interesting accommodation type. And then Bow-Wow did also recently the timber capsule. So for the Onomichi cyclist station. And this also the interesting idea coming from our research. So we are very fascinated by using a local wood and collaborate with the local timber industry. So that's why, in this case, we propose some pillar and beams and also sliding the board Itakura system to using this system, and then to make a capsule for sleeping. And the house issue is Azuma Tower House, and also the Maikawa apartment, and a hole in the house, and Hagiso, they exhibit in the show. And then Bow-Wow, so of course, we did over 10 years ago, so we started to think about the office and the house together in our building. So it's called 15 years ago, sorry. So 15 years ago, 2005, yes. So we live in a long time already. 15 years ago. So, and then it's also we started to think about how the office and also house work and live together. So that is also our strongest proposal, not only the house. And also the recently, we also do the interesting apartment in the rural area, because the rural area has a lot of mountain area, so mountain area. It's also interesting, they have a very big house, but some houses are vacant, but it's not so easy to buy rent by newcomers who come from in urban area. So that's why they need some interval, like buffer apartment space. Now they familiar to the local people.
Yeah, the area is confronting the depopulation, but the young people from the city are interested in move into this forest industry area, but there is no rental house. So this is a project to provide the rental house made of wood from the region. Yeah.
So that's why, so of course, everybody expected, okay, urban context should be more high dense in the apartment, but in this case, in the mountains, they have apartment. And last one is, I think we did also the one project in New York. It's for the Guggenheim lab, and then. This case, the area was abandoned and no building at the moment. And then so we proposed some facility for the area to activate the public cultural event for the summer. And we proposed a very simple light structure and to create an interesting moment. So, Guggenheim, BMW Guggenheim Lab. Yes, yeah. Thank you very much for asking me. Yes, but I think maybe this kind of different, same facilities or same idea, but 1964 and 2020 in the show, but also the Bow-Wow confronting to the different assumption that compare from the 1960s. So that is very, very interesting. And also we have to understand what is behind of the building or design and style. So that if we could discuss with Shohei-san, so that's very, very interesting.
Yes, this is a kind of a challenge. The challenge to survey the new direction of the museum space or art gallery space and in the city. So
Okay, thank you very much.
Maybe they're switching the computer so I can maybe start because the time is, it's Friday night. Well, I met both of them around 2000 when I just started at OMA in Rotterdam. And of course that's 2000, you know, just before their Made in Tokyo came out. But of course I know of them when I was, of course, a student. And, you know, I'm personally believe that I'm also influenced by kind of Venturi camp, and I don't know anyone in the world who can deliver such a consistency of research to architecture, to even personality, to a kind of couple, some kind of funny moments. I mean, it looks so consistent to me that it's almost kind of suspicious. To the level how they're so much kind of curating their kind of entire atmosphere. So that's why I even dressed like all black today to kind of contrast to them how, you know, their unpretentiousness is like a kind of level that no one can reach. And so I dressed very pretentiously today. Also, I think that currently many people want to go to Tokyo, and I have a theory that, of course, a long-time recession created its own kind of interesting typologies and languages, but they have been a really great ambassador of Tokyo, really depicting a very kind of unique architectural typology, open space, or the behaviors. And I think that's a really kind of, I think Japanese architecture scene really owe them how they communicated the charm or the kind of dysfunctionality of Tokyo. I'm a little bit worried about the shallowness of my presentation, but we had a very brief discussion before, and I'm gonna focus a little bit on the comparison of Tokyo and New York. I don't believe in rankings, but as you know, there are many rankings right now. And this is just a brief comparison of New York and Tokyo. Okay, New York as a top. They're actually always kind of inconsistently kind of in the top tier 4. Tokyo is going back and forth between 4 and 3. New York going between 1 and 2. I never believed Tokyo going over Paris, but somehow some statistics show that Tokyo is the 3rd. It's in a way in a similar domain. Tokyo and New York is in a kind of top rankings, like as you see, like in economy, R&D, cultural accessibility. But they're also like failing together on like livability and environment. Of course, livability in Tokyo, number 9. Of course, Tokyo is slightly much bigger. So of course, the livability has a little bit more, you know, it's more capable to absorb. But New York is, as you know, not so great. This is also how ranking actually fluctuates. What I want you to see is not Tokyo and New York, but how dynamic actually the 7 to 14 is. That means I almost get suspicious how kind of boring actually Tokyo and New York is, because it means it's not really kind of changing, and I think it kind of represents these 4 top cities, London, New York, Tokyo, Paris, is kind of, in a way, not a future city, if we talk about past and future. Singapore is most boring. Yeah, well, they're very consistent. That's true. They secured a place, yeah. This is also interesting. We were also surprised by researching. Tokyo is in Outlook number 6, and they're actually going up in ranking from, like, they went 8 points up from the last year. New York actually going 22 points down from the 2nd place. I don't know if this is something to do with the kind of current regime or of US that makes other people vote for not for New York, but I don't really believe in this ranking, but it's interesting that people see more future in Tokyo, not to New York. But now, of course, I run an office here and I live here for almost 13 years. As they kind of depicted the kind of typology, I think there are a couple of interesting typology that I can compare to Tokyo that Tokyo doesn't really have. For example, urban museum. And I think that in Tokyo, there are many great museums, but often in a kind of secluded park area or some kind of old zone. But as you know, in New York, there are many kind of great institutions. And of course, there's a kind of different funding system, etc. But I also worked on those museums like Whitney Extension, which got canceled. But now I have a privilege to work on extension to a Sana Design Museum in Bowery Street. As you know, Bowery Street is a kind of sign of gentrification, and there are a lot of kind of Pritzker Prize winner architecture kind of gathering in a very close distance. New Museum is, as other institutions, growing out of just doing exhibitions, but doing other activities. This is the site, the current site where Sana Building is. Our new site is skinnier and longer, so we of course sort of a kind of a complementary relationship, but also a contrast or independency. So we started to look even before designing some kind of interesting relationship that two entities can have, such as this one, Marina and her husband, but people has to go through in between, or the rocket launcher and the rocket itself, one supporting to be, of course, launched. So what we did in the end is to really make a building that is almost clone, replica of the new museum. So every program is aligned to the existing building, but the only difference is to add the infrastructure at the back and the front where you see the public activities. So you can see this is much more inward looking. Here it's more extroverted with, you see the circulation. We also created a public plaza at the terminus of Prince Street. So the activity is quite visible. There's a steep setback here so that it preserved the view from the existing terrace. We also were very conscious of the kind of balance of verticality and horizontality. Because of that setback, as you can see from the street, the museum actually disappears and gives respect to the Sana building. Other typology is the park infrastructure. I was a little bit kind of, I was regretting when to put this in because their park in Shibuya got taken over by developer. But I think this is kind of infrastructural park is a typology that is emerging everywhere. As you know, the more visitors you have to the park in New York now, and this is also interesting how much economical incentives you get to the parks nowadays. So there's a kind of hand-in-hand relationship between development and park. This is what it used to be. But now, of course, because of the incentive, when you walk along the High Line, you almost walking through the tunnel because too much incentive gave, of course, too much volume around it, so that you never have a kind of clear view, which I personally think it's kind of interesting. But of course, this represents the relationship between the kind of the development incentive and the park nowadays. We did our own version of the Bridge Park in DC, which was to connect old neighborhood to a proper DC neighborhood. That is in the form of X, where you create the public plaza in the center of the X, and then people can just actually continue to go up to have a higher vantage point. It's almost like a kind of section of the L'Enfant's plan in DC. So they have a very skewed X. So, and around the X you have different program. So our bridge is more or less like the Rialto, but slightly kind of happier with the program embedded. Condominium is also something that is maybe a little bit different in Tokyo and New York. As you know, these hyper thin towers that are emerging in New York, Tokyo has been very consistently boring, and I think it's almost admirably boring in Tokyo, which I think is, of course, due to a kind of earthquake and so on, but there is no design in the condominiums, or the notion of condominium is very not developed in Tokyo. As you know, in New York, this is an actual scene which no one can really believe that is happening. The second row from the park, of course, going taller and taller to actually gain the park view. And the sales of penthouse that goes over any kind of budget that we have for making one museum. So, of course, with this money, you can, in even this one, 240 million for the Central Park South. Of course, he bought like 4 levels, but still, I think it's a remarkable kind of economical difference between this kind of sales and what we get for the money for the public buildings. This is showing the developers basically branding for Manhattan. As you can see, the developers name each kind of neighborhood for their branding. But our first project in Manhattan was actually magically a tiny area that was in the cracks of branding. So this tiny area was not branded. And this was a site which is close to Gramercy Park and Madison Square Park. So it had this kind of split personality. So we basically presented this scheme which really shows this kind of split personality or dual identity of this site by showing the instability of the, having this kind of 3-dimensional corner and showing the instability of the identity. But what it does is also, as you know, in New York, it's 1 square foot of public space in a commercial development is very difficult. But here, because of the cut corner, we could gain maybe 10 square feet of public space more to the sidewalk in the around the building. The building has this kind of facade gradation from going from punched window to more open towards the corner. So you can see the gradation that is being contextual. Mixed use is also something that we think is becoming more and more dominant in any given city. And now I'm going to move on to my project in Tokyo. This is city of Tokyo represented by different colors or showing different characters. It's a big enough city to have different characters. If we compare this to a dinner table, it's basically a la carte style, and people share food and people have conversations, different dishes, so you have more exciting table. But there are many kind of mixed-use development. Huge mixed-use development actually has same exact ingredients. This is Roppongi Hills, this is Midtown, that has almost basically the same program, which we call it a bento box development. That really kind of package a similar program into a box and then basically deliver wherever it is. So what used to be very exciting as a dinner table or a very, conversation stimulator, the food was a conversation stimulator, this is becoming more and more predictable. So, of course, we as an architect designing a mixed-use building, there's no inherent difference even if you make a slightly better design if the program doesn't change. So what we're doing for Mori building right now, but we still have to do something, not just criticizing for developers. We're doing this tower in Toranomon. It's close to the Bay Area. It's in the junction of the new and old. Mori has been building a lot of towers, so what we argued was, okay, maybe it's about time to think of a network between the towers, not just a tower as a standalone object. So this was based on the new axis in New Boulevard, so we decided to basically continue this activity in green. So this tower gets dedicated to connect to other towers so that their development or the neighborhood gets connected by this tower. So the tower actually has this bridge going through the center of the building like this. And in order to do this, we're moving the core from the central core to the side core at the middle, at the sky lobby level. Not just that, we are concentrating all the special program into the center so that you can actually see the special program from everywhere in Tokyo. And recognize the axis, notion of axis doesn't really exist in the city of Tokyo because it's quite organic. So I thought it was interesting that this skyscraper actually really shows the rare urban quality like an axis. It also has connected to new metro stations. So it has, this is that deck, but this connected to new Hibiya line. So you can also arrive to this building by new subway station that will have a great atrium. We are also planning another museum on top and an event space that has a great view to the Imperial Palace. Also have a rooftop garden and a small infinity pool, like you can observe the Imperial Palace. These are shapes. I want to end with Olympics because I run a studio called Rerun, basically thinking of the 2020 Olympic Games with Christy Chen. She's here at Columbia GSAP. Because I was very interested in also second round of Olympics because the first round is always exciting, related to modernization, etc. Second round, of course, you can rethink what you did on the first time. I wanted to show two students' project. First one is this person who rethought about the venues of the Olympic Games, thinking that maybe the new stadium should happen in the vicinity, not in the city, but in the vicinity of the new acclaimed land. And also between the Olympic Village and the Tsukiji Market, which was going to be the media center. So what he did was to incorporate the stadium as a kind of just a seating that is hugged by two roads. And that's the kind of state of stadium that is in a typical case when there's no event. But then you can actually bring the turf, floating turf, to the stadium like this. So whenever there's an event, you can just have this kind of floating field. And actually this is possible technologically right now. So this actually exists as an infrastructure, but only at the event of Olympics, there's this kind of field appearing, which we thought was kind of cool. Lastly, Tokyo Olympic actually is the third one. You know, it was also there was 1940 that was canceled by the war, but actually Tokyo got the bid. But then because of the war, it got canceled. So it's in a way, it's the third time, and you might know also 2016 Tokyo bid, but we lost. This student group actually focused on how Japan has been thinking of relocating the capital from Tokyo to somewhere else, because Tokyo is, 1 minute left, Tokyo is quite still dangerous, considered dangerous because of the earthquake and tsunami and so on. So there are many politicians who is still thinking of the relocation of the capital to somewhere safer in Tokyo. Actually, it's not too surprising. It's quite surprising that in Japan, historically, in 2,000 years or more, there are 42 times that they relocated the capital. So Tokyo is rather new, but it has been moving when the regime or when the kind of emperor has changed. So it's not really new to the history that to think of a relocation. And then while they were thinking of the relocation, of course, the disaster in Tohoku region happened. So there are more kind of voices of relocating the capital, or this notion of battery city. I don't really like the name, but battery city means when the kind of real capital gets damaged, there will be alternate capital that can be switched on instantly, so to basically continue the capital program. So they have been thinking Itami Airport as the location of this kind of other capital, because Itami Airport is within the city, and they have been actually suppressing the FAR of the surrounding area because of the air flights. So it has been always a problem. So there's been a talk to create this airport into a kind of mixed-use zone that has a capital capability. So this student actually thought of linking this alternate capital to the Olympic program, which was more or less in this kind of same program area. And not even that, linking this maglev that Japan has been planning since 70s, already like 40 years more, 50 years even. So finally it's happening, as you might know. And if it happens, Tokyo and Osaka will be connected almost within close to 1 hour. That means it's almost like a one city, Tokyo and Osaka, which so this student thought, and at that moment, these two mayors were quite close. So he actually laid the Olympic program along the maglev route, and then basically also distributed the capital program also along the maglev route. So basically, the entire program is distributed through the infrastructure and really considering Tokyo and Osaka and that entire zone as one city, which we thought it was quite exciting. We went and then presented to that politician who was really highly, very vocal about Battery City. He really didn't understand, and he really didn't care about the distribution, but he only cared what we were doing in Itami Airport. So it didn't really go well, but we at least tried to sell it. Okay, I want to end with this model shot where I'm working with Mori. As you might know, they have this incredible 1:1000 physical model of entire Tokyo and also Manhattan. They were moving at the time when I just take this shot, so the Tokyo and New York was in a kind of same room, and it looked like in the kind of same land. Thank you.
I'd like to talk with Sho today. Shohei. About what is relevant the language or relevant words to discuss about architecture and city together. Yeah, and then society. Okay, and then I recently through this exhibition really is a very good opportunity for us to think about the generation of facilities. And I think now it's 2019 is already 74 years later after the end of World War II, and also 150 years after the major restoration. And then most of the modern facility has been introduced in Meiji period in order to pretend Japan as a kind of modern country. And then in order to, because at first when Japan opened the border after the Tokugawa regime, Japan was somehow obliged to make an uneven agreement of trade with foreign countries, and in order to improve the condition, Japanese government, Meiji government, tried to modernize our society to fit to the foreign countries, to improve this relationship. And then modern building types like museums and schools, libraries, stations, factories, all these things are very important facilities to materialize the idea of modern society. And so in that sense, all these facilities are from, it's always together with the preceding concept. So the concept first, and then a space later. And then architects are kind of first, they appears first time in the history of Japan to materialize those preceding concepts, which is given from the decision maker, political decision maker. Most of these concepts are imported from abroad. And then people, at first, I think people didn't know how to behave in the library, for example, and then how to behave in the school. So, for example, there is very many, how to say, the TV drama or kind of movie which focus on that period and then focus on the rural community. Most of the case, the farmers' parents don't want children to let go to school because they are afraid of their kids are kind of taken by the society because they want to keep their children in the kind of governance of the family to let them work together for farming. And then it's always described that this is a kind of it's because of this pre-modern understanding of the society and also lack of knowledge about the school. But actually, I think parents didn't know what is actually happening in the school, and then they gradually start learning about what is happening in the school through the report from the children. And then, so now our generation, we were born in the society where all this modern facility has already established. And then we naturally learn the behavior in each public facilities, and then we can also reproduce a kind of a casual version of library, casual version of the school by ourselves. Now it's happening in the empty house in Tokyo. For example, Akiya program is now, challenged by this kind of operation. And then I think this transition of the notion of the facility and the role of architects, and now many architects are involved in the fulfilling the empty house by introducing this behavior of the people and the skill set of the people, and then this is it is business-wise it's tiny, it's nothing. And architects can't earn money by this kind of job. And since OMA is designing the tower, and in Tokyo, and then young architects are working in a tiny little project. So but I think this is interesting because this small practice fulfilling the empty house by the behavior of the people and skill set of the people, which is somehow learned from the public facilities or kind of modern facility typology, is showing a kind of a criticism on the facility itself. So people are really bored by just being provided services from the facilities. People want to be a kind of part of it. They want to be a party, actual party of the activities. They want to participate into maintaining, running the place, and all these things needs is not really fulfilled by the public modern typologies, modern facilities. So I think we should really grasp this kind of criticism from the people towards this history of facility typology. And then it's time to discuss, because we have already experienced 3 times or 4 times regionalization of public facility typologies in our society. And we couldn't do that in 1960s, because in 1960s, it was a time when the society tried to reconstruct the city rapidly, and then no time to discuss about these generation issues. But now it's possible. And then I think it's, I think it's quite new for architects to discuss, and then it's a great chance for architects to bring our profession, reposition our profession into the society again.
Okay.
No, it's not just, no, my opinion.
I thought it was just ending with your monologue, but which is also fine. But I think there's a couple of things I want to mention because your talk captured many of the features that I'm noticing being outside of Japan. For example, I think I always admire young. Well, I don't know if we can call young anymore, but the generation really always tries to challenge the premise of modern architecture in Japan more than anywhere else I know. There must be a huge either complex or confusion or interest or curiosity how modern architecture was introduced in Japan and then broke its own historical, traditional, crafts and typology and so on, and how we started to adapt to Western, norms, which, as you say, in our generation, we didn't have such a strong doubt when we were younger, but of course, as a profession in Japan, young architects, including young architects, maybe also thanks to you and, for example, Ito-san's school, who always thinks there needs to be either progress from modernism or we have to really understand our own kind of cultural background to come up with our own architectural framework or take, which I always admire because I don't, probably tackle it like that when I'm designing architecture. Although I think the typological change is something that we are both interested in, and even though I'm showing a developer's project, a big project or small project, I think the re-examination of the current typology is always useful as an architectural expertise. Second, I think talking about this kind of small architecture and, I'm doing big project in Tokyo, young architects doing small project. I think you are a little bit responsible to the younger generation, especially my generation, who was at the most intense moment of recession in Japan, graduated, so there was no job. And, you actually instigated young architects to do smaller projects. You were complaining about, we can't make money, but you actually brought a lot of younger architects to that direction. So I think you're responsible.
No, yes, true, yes. But I think this is a way to take, recapture the, I think why the most of what the interesting architecture and architecture I admire is architecture which is always which really grasps the sense of being part of the part of it, part of the project. And I don't know how to say in English. In Japanese, it's tojisha-sei. Tojisha, and then
like kind of your ownership of
like
being part of the
and then
operation.
So today Japanese society is really it's our livelihood, and all the activity, most of the activities are set upon the industrial society network. So most of things are provided by the industry, by the service as services. And then this is really, everything is prepared, and then it's very also, and then this preparation, this too much services from the industry, somehow exploit the opportunity to be party of the project. Yes. So your position is somehow very much restricted and limited because most of the part is taken by the industry. And then, so you are just playing a very limited role. And this is very hard to feel this partyness is somehow exploited by the industry. And then I think that this is a really big issue. And then I think a young architect who is working a small project is actually happy because they can do it with their own responsibility, and then they feel very strong sense of party within their small projects. Yeah, and then I think that this is, I think this is really important because yes, the small project is okay. Financially, it's tiny, and then it's economically, it's not big impact to the society. But if you see these projects through the network perspective, the scale of the project doesn't matter. You know?
Yeah, well, that's exactly my point, though. I'm not saying that the smaller project is worse or a bigger project is worse. I think this obsession to have your own kind of environment and also starting from small, and that creates always, you know, great example of Japanese architecture scene. But I'm just pointing out that that sometimes also represents the closedness of Japanese architecture industry, where big commissions or potentially big commissions or public commissions don't really go to young architects. So the only domain they can operate seriously on is such a kind of smaller domain where the industry, there is no system yet, which of course it comes hand in hand, but you know, that part of the creative part of Japanese architecture is always highlighted, but there always also a very uncreative part of Japanese architecture which is not so known. So I wonder how you, I know you actually instigated the other part, but how do you think you can actually influence the other side of?
But it's maybe I'm going to insert the gender issue. We wanted to hear the women architect voice, maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
I tried to.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. No, it's fine. So, because Yoshiharu says it's a small, it's also very kind of practical, so scale for the tackle, so by more like physical or like a more handling, so by the person who wants to very change something. But I think we were trained like somehow so from small project, and now that becomes a little bit large scale, but we always try to hear some context or voice from the client in a really real project or real issue, and create a kind of frame so for how to explain this issue to be more large scale of the project. Because even if small house, but it becomes a larger network. So if we could train as this kind of point, so maybe so we also study to how we create a project itself. So I think maybe so of course this times also Kamiyama project, and we show also Ito-san coming, and also our project too, and also like some young people started to the business, also then create some new project as entrepreneur. So I think it's also one of the way to how the architects could be initiate or like a more leadership, so to become of the society creation, and not just given some project from someone. So I think like Shohei-san also try to your student project to present to the Osaka. So as thinking about the new frame of the Olympic Games. But I think these kind of things we need to more the active, so to how to propose the society, which kind of frame will be more creative, so and also dynamic way to think about the future. So.
The entrepreneurship is something that you are both professors. Do you more and more basically tell students just don't work for anyone and just start your own?
Yeah, I'm always talking about this because now North Korea probably launched a missile to Japan, and then so you feel students believe that they are young and then they have so much long future, but no, you don't have future anymore. So you should do now what you want to do it. Yeah. And then I'm always encourage my students to live, as they want. So they don't have time. No. And then also the problem of young people, young students. I realize that since our society is really focusing on the issue of super-aged society, so all the issues, many issues from this, many topics are from these issues. All the news and the TV program and movies and also everyday goods, becomes very well adapted to the aging society. And then young people already adapted these kind of goods and these kind of programs. So they are still 22 and 23 years old, but their mindset is very old. Yeah, they are easily influenced by the society, and they are very sensitive. So it's very dangerous. So I always push them to fight against this super aging society.
I think. Like some of my students or some of my former students are already started to the new business. So that's already, I think, of course, Yoshiharu mentioned pushing to, but they also try to create some different perspective. And then that's always very, I'm here from them, what they are doing, so very so happy. And also we emphasize this kind of direction. So because we need as a architects, or maybe not only the architects, but we need to create our job by ourselves. So that I think if we could also very interesting, it's big challenging. And also I'm now teaching university, but of course university also should be create different teaching, or what we do a fisherman's school, or what we can learn, so more different things, not only the school, university, or more very traditional or interesting things around. So that, and also nature and climate and so many things around. So that this kind of program or learning program, it's also one of the interesting the job for share this knowledge to the thinking.
Yeah, and also entrepreneurship is is a trigger to introduce architectural imagination, or which young student learns in the school, into into getting the sense of being part of it. Yeah, and this partyness is very important. So now it's very important to introduce architectural imagination into this sense of being part of it.
Yeah, I just want to change the topic, but still continuing the issue of partyness, and because you mentioned before the talk that when you see New York, it's becoming a little bit kind of homogenized and kind of being flat and everywhere the same, which used to be different. My bento box talk is also talking about similar issue of, the the developments and basically the kind of repertoire or the norms of the current developments actually creates the kind of similar experience everywhere. Do you think the entrepreneurship or the sense of ownership, sense of running a party, which I'm actually also saying, you know, we as an architect should be able to propose a program, not just building, because the program is set. We're just given the, you know, the ingredients of bento box. We're just designing the, you know, box. Then nothing will really change. Now, that's what I'm trying to say in those slides. But do you think that's the key to break through this homogeneity that is happening everywhere in the world?
Yeah, I think so. Because the reason why it becomes homogenized, the reason of the homogeneity is a lack of sense of history, for example. And then if you have a very powerful imagination to be part of it, of the certain period. For me, the post-war period is extremely important. And also major restoration is very important. And how to be part of it. How to imagine the human beings, the Japanese, who experienced that period. I think it's almost impossible for us to imagine it because the background and the social conditions are so different. But it's very important to understand, to try to imagine those human beings. And then I think architecture, city, is a very important entrance to the kind of device to bring us into that kind of field, in that kind of feeling.
Okay, so
sorry, one more. Sorry.
Okay.
So, but I think it's also very important because now I feel also some afraid. So for example, New York and also Japan, also Tokyo, also now the recently the building speed is very large scale and very so speed is maximized, so very so fast. And then I think if we constantly slow building one by one, so I think it becomes more diversity or variety of the depths of the history. And also layering. And then Tokyo is also one of the most interesting, so the high skyscraper, but next to the just one-story building. Something like this kind of contrast is one of the interesting effect or dynamism in the Tokyo, the character. And also New York, maybe, so each block, as Rem says, so each block was a very different character. So that's why the New York was a very, very interesting diversity world. So this kind of happen, it's okay, but it needs also some certain speed, good speed, so for keeping. And then we need to a little bit think about how the society or how the city growing should be a good timing, so to become some more richness or nicer conditions.
But if a developer asks you to design a skyscraper in Tokyo tomorrow for you, what kind of design do you do then?
The next generation. Next generation.
You don't do it, or you do it?
We do it.
You do it.
Of course.
Okay.
Great.
Of course.
So maybe we turn to the gender issue to democratic issue to be able to audience have a chance to talk with them. We have a reception after at the first floor. So please join us and ask more questions to them. And the Atelier Bow-Wow curated exhibition is open until 9, so we have 1 hour more. So please enjoy the second floor. And please say I'd like to say thank you for 3 of you. Have the great presentation and discuss for the past and the future. And all the future is really designer new. And thank you so much. So great discussion. Thank you for joining us.